Good evening, everybody. This is our third and possibly, I think, the final video that we're going to do on Next War system using the Next War Taiwan game. And what we're going to jump into tonight is the advanced game. And I think I mentioned this earlier, maybe in the first demo, that the standard game it's fairly complex on its own. The advanced game adds quite a bit more to the game. And what I'm going to try to do tonight is hit the main parts of that, the essentials of the advanced game. There's an awful lot in there, so I highly recommend that players be familiar with the standard game rules before tackling the advanced game rules, because the advanced game rules add so much more that relies on the standard game. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. The scenario that I've got set up here is basically it assumes that the People's Republic of China has attained tactical surprise on the island of Taiwan and her allies. It also assumes that the U.S. has adopted an aggressive approach. Now, whenever you set up an advanced game scenario, you're going to choose one of three surprise levels. There's either going to be strategic surprise, which means the PRC hits they hit the ground running, and the allies are not in position to resist initially. So that would be the ideal situation for the PRC, would be to achieve strategic surprise. Tactical surprise, I think, is probably the best balanced, situation, as they attain a measure of surprise, but the allies aren't caught entirely flat-footed. And then there's the what's called long-term buildup or something like that. I can't remember the exact term, but that one assumes that there's really minimal amount of surprise and extended buildup. That's what it's called. There's only minimal amount of surprise, and so both sides start toe to toe in the ring. And I think that's probably where the PRC is going to have the hardest time getting a toehold on the island with Allied air power, because Allied air power is probably their biggest weapon in terms of resisting the invasion until the U.S. Navy can get on site. So what happens here with this particular scenario is there's a number of things in the sequence of play that get omitted, and you're not going to be using the main map in this scenario. You'd be using the general game information display, the air superiority fold-out display, the naval map, and there's an air-naval battle scenario sheet that we're going to be using. You can access the general information display by pressing the I button on the left-hand side of the toolbar. It's in like a green circle. That'll reveal the status of special operations teams and cruise missile points, air mobile points, and so forth. We've looked at a lot of that in past demos. Tonight we'll be referencing that for our special operations forces in just a moment. The Airspirity window, if you open that up by clicking on looks like a flying MiG-19 or something like that, you open that guy up, you can adjust the zoom to your liking, and that contains the display that has all of the advanced game aircraft. The air war is pretty much going to be waged on this map, and with the exception of if you're playing a different scenario, units that conduct airstrikes on targets on the regular map would come off of this display to hit the main map. But in this scenario, the main map is abstracted, and so we're pretty much going to do all the combat's going to actually take place on this. Then there is the air-sea battle scenario sheet. If you open that up, it looks like a little radar button on the toolbar. And that's got a replication of the tracks, the air defense tracks that are on the main map. It's the same. It's basically the same thing that you find on the main map, but it's all concentrated here, as well as there's tracks for airbase damage, port damage, and there's a Taiwan holding box where ground troops that are taken to the island are basically dumped off, and that is going to go towards the victory conditions of the scenario. So, and it's also got the AWACS advantage and the ASW level and sub-threat level track. It's all on this thing. And the air superiority track is also on here rather than on the main map. So that's what we'll be doing tonight. go ahead and get started here. I actually made a few notes for this. I don't know if I didn't have time to put them up and make them available to everyone, but just to give you a quick overview of the advanced game, what's new in this as opposed to the standard game is now supply becomes a very real consideration. There's an optional rule for the standard game that you can track supply, but the advanced game adds a bit more to that. And so in the advanced game, you have to look for supply sources. And in this game, it's going to be urban hexes as well as supply depots, which are counters in the game, and mobile supply units, or MSUs. And finally, beachheads are supply sources. And they supply up to a number of movement points away from that particular supply source. So urban hexes supply units 6 movement points away. That's not printed, on the map. That's just something you got to remember. The supply depots, they supply units up to 8 movement points away, and that's actually printed on game counters. So just for the sake of consideration, I'm going to go ahead and take an American supply depot and put it next to the sequence of play so you can see the values on the counter itself. If you've got the unit identification chart, you'll see that the number up in the upper right-hand corner of this game piece, the supply depot game piece, has the number 8 in a white circle, and that's reminding you that it can supply units 8 movement points away. The numbers beneath that, the white number in the black circle, that's the number of stacking points. The same kind of depiction that you find with other pieces in the game. That's how many stacking points that this occupies. So again, all the stacking rules from the standard game apply in the advanced game. The efficiency rating of the unit is the number to the immediate right of that. So this has an efficiency rating of 3. So if you tack it and it's by itself, it will defend by itself, but it has a very low efficiency rating. Finally, the numbers on the bottom, it's just like any other combat unit. It's got an attack rating of 0, a defense rating of 2, and movement rating of 0. Now, what you can do with these things is you can actually turn them into mobile supply units. You can take supply depots and you can convert them into, if I'm right, I think it's like 2 MSUs. And so MSUs become like supply depots, except that they're mobile. They use truck movement rating. That's the number 4 in the white circle, yellow 4 in the white circle on the bottom. It's got a defense rating that's lower. Its defense rating is only 1, and it only supplies units up to 4 movement points away. But it's actually mobile, and it occupies 2 stacking points. That's another big deal with these guys, the MSUs. So in the advanced game, you're going to have to navigate the challenge of establishing depots and defending those, and then moving those depots. You got to make MSUs from the depots and move your supply train down along the way. This is especially true for the Korea game, where the North Koreans are pressing south. The further they go south, the more supply becomes a consideration. So the supply rules for the advanced game are pretty cool in that game here. For this game, supply to me, it didn't feel like it was as big of a deal as it was in Korea, but it's still a present reality. So you have supply in the advanced game. You also have electronic warfare modeled. You have to detect units before you can launch strikes against them and so forth. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. HQs come into play. We're not going to use them in this scenario, but I did drag some into, I think, the PRC box on the naval map. Let me go ahead and drag one onto the main map here for you so you can see it. We'll put them next to the American MSU. This is the HQ for the PRC 44th Airborne Division. So you got HQs now. Again, the counter ratings, it uses the same layout as your combat units. Stacking point of 1, that's the number in the white number in the black circle on the left. The number on the right is its efficiency rating. So it has a high efficiency rating of 6. the numbers on the bottom. It has an attack value of 0, but there's a 5 in a superscript. That number 5 is its range of projecting its HQ capabilities. And I'll mention what those are in just a sec. The number in the middle, obviously, that's its defense rating of 2, and number on the right, it's a yellow 4 in a black box. The yellow means it's air mobile capable, so you can paradrop this guy. You can send him by helicopters and whatnot. So the big deal with HQs is HQs are powerful from a distance. They're also important for maintaining unit cohesion between formations. The formations are color-coded. The NATO symbols in them are color-coded. But the big thing about HQs is and this is all in section 18 of your rule book, by the way, so you can reference it later. But HQs have what's called capabilities. And I like to break it down a little bit further than it is in the rule book. There's active capabilities and then there's passive capability. The active capability works like the attack helicopters, in the sense that when you execute a capability, you rotate the counter 90 degrees, and then when you execute another capability, it's rotated another 90 degrees, and when the counter is rotated 180 degrees, it has used all of its capabilities for the rest of the turn. And then during the refresh at the very end of the turn, they will refresh just like your helicopters would. So the capabilities that you have are strike. You can use this thing to strike detected HQs, mobile supply units within its range, and this HQ has a range of 5. So anything within 5 hexes, you can strike detected units, headquarters, and MSUs. You can also support ground units, ground unit combat within its range. So up to 5 hexes away, you can add combat factors to an attack equal to its capability range. So the 44th Airborne has a range of 5. That means it can add 5 points to the strength of an attack or defense up to 5 hexes away. But it can only do that for units that are of the same formation. So that's an important thing. And remember that units that have a white NATO symbol are non-formation specific, so you can you could attach them basically to the 44th Airborne in order to gain support from it. So that's what combat support does from headquarters. They add more strength to your attacks. That's an abstraction, I guess, of the artillery and so forth. Lastly, and I haven't ever actually used this in a game, but there's optional rules in the games for chemical warfare. And so HQs can project chemical warfare attacks up to their range. So this guy could be involved in chemical warfare attacks up to 5 hexes away. And again, once you use a capability once in a turn, you mark it on the counter. And then once it uses its second capability, it's done for the turn. And you can, again, use combat support for attack and or defense. So if one of your guys within 5 hexes was being attacked, you could use him to support him. HQs also have what I like to call a passive capability, in that this capability exists, and when you use it, it doesn't rotate the counter. In other words, anytime the situation comes up, you can continually use this capability, and that is air defense. Every headquarters projects an air defense 2 hexes away from it. So, and it's a -1 air defense die roll modifier within 2 hexes. That's going to apply to detection, SAM attacks, AAA, anything within 2 hexes. Aircraft are a little bit more at risk than they would be otherwise. So that's what's going on with HQs. Again, we're not going to really use them tonight. They're referenced in the rulebook section 18. Now we come to detection. Detection's rule, section number 21 in your rulebook. I'm just going to go over it real briefly, because when we actually put it into play, it'll make more sense just to see it than for me to talk about it first. There's really 5 different kinds of detection. I have 4 in my notes, but there's really 5 kinds of detection in the game. You have what's called automatic detection, and that is installations, your ports, your air bases. And again, remember, air bases are the white aircraft in black circles or the blue aircraft in black circles on the map. Airfields are not installations. Remember the distinction there. And airfields look like a prop plane in a gray circle on the map. Ports are installations in the game, and I think that plastics factory in hex 2807 is a installation. So the installations are automatically detected, so you can always launch airstrikes against them. Also enemy ground units that are adjacent to friendly ground units are also automatically detected in the game. So you don't have to roll for detection for ground units if they're adjacent to one of your ground units. Then there's air reconnaissance. What that depends on is the level of air superiority. Whenever we finish the air superiority here towards the end of this demo, what we'll do is this marker. There's one on the map here that I'm gonna try to move around here. All right, there's this air superiority marker. Let's just say that the PRC achieves air superiority in the game. Then you'll see that I move it on the track to the superiority box. And I'm using the main map for now. Beneath the superiority box, there's an oval and it says 30 hexes. What that means is anything within 30 hexes of the PRC is considered detected, whether it's adjacent to one of your guys or not. And in Taiwan, you got to remember that PRC is across the Straits of Taiwan, so you have to count from the west map edge, which is actually the top of your map. You have to count 8 more hexes. So if you look at hex 2801, for example, that is actually 8 hexes from the PRC, and then from there you can continue to count. So 30 hexes pretty much is the span of the map. So if you've got air superiority, that means they're detecting everything on the main map there. On the Korea map, that becomes much more of an issue because Korea's got a little bit more depth to it, and so you're going to be counting that from North Korean installations. You'll be counting 30 hexes from there if the marker was in North Korea's superiority. So that's how you detect things from air superiority perspective. All ground units within that range except HQs and supply depots would be detected. HQs are a little harder to pinpoint. The third kind of detection is called electronic detection, and how this is done is you detect headquarters but not supreme headquarters. Supreme headquarters are headquarters that have a white HQ NATO symbol on them. That's how you're going to distinguish them. I believe they're Army level in the Next War Korea game. And how you do the advanced detection rule here, electronic detection, is there's a table called electronic detection. It's on the back of the advanced game fold-out charts. And so you roll on this thing, and there's 2 columns. One is for the Allied and one's for the non-Allied. There's a few die roll modifiers to it, and you roll for each enemy headquarters during the appropriate phase of the sequence of play, and it determines whether that unit is detected or not. And so that's typically going to be how you're going to detect headquarters, because more often than not, you don't want them on the front lines. So adjacency is not going to be how you detect them. How you're going to detect them is you're going to detect them by making this electronic detection die roll. Lastly, there is, the fourth way that you can detect is by Special Operations Forces doing a reconnaissance mission. We're going to do some of that in just a sec. There is a 5th kind of detection, and that's what's called local detection, and it's only used under certain circumstances. It's talked about in section 24.3 of the rule book. So it's not going to be in the same section as other detection rules, section 21. It's kind of stuck in with the air defenses because that's mostly how it's going to be used. It's going to be used against air mobile movement, attack helicopter strikes, combat support, airstrike missions, that sort of thing. Where normal detection does not apply, there's still a chance that there will be a local detection, and so there's always a chance that the defenses will be able to get a shot off at attacking aircraft and helicopters. So those are the detection rules, and again, section 21 is your friend for looking that stuff up. Does anybody have any questions so far about anything we've covered so far? All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the first SOF, Special Operations Forces phase of the game turn. During the Special Operations Forces phase, there's two of them. There's a first one and there's a second one. During the first one, the initiative player gets to use his Special Operations Forces to conduct missions. And then when that's done, you go into the air naval phase, and that's where you can do airstrikes, things like that. The second SOF happens after the air naval phase, which puts you at something of a disadvantage. But the non-initiative player will be conducting his SOF attacks during the second Special Operations phase. So how Special Forces work in the game is it's mission based. There are certain missions that these teams can perform, and the procedure is, if you look at the general game record track, that's the green button with the letter I in it, you'll see that there's two boxes with the flag of Taiwan and the flag of the People's Republic of China kind of emblazoned behind it. Inside those, there's a number of tokens that say SOF mission. So what's going to happen is the PRC is the initiative player, and so they have access to like 6 tokens are considered available. And so all six tokens can be used if the player wants to conduct these missions. And the missions are allocated first, which means you'll take the token off here and you'll dump him off on whatever hex he's going to be working in, or whatever area he's going to be working in. And once you've allocated everybody that you want to allocate, then you execute those missions in whatever order that you choose. So that's important. You have to allocate first, but you don't have to pre-designate the order that you execute them. For example, let's say you wanted to launch a raid on an undetected unit somewhere. Well, you could send 2 special operations teams in there. You can send one team in and try to detect and hope that they do, so that the second team could actually do the raid on the detected unit. So the types of missions you have are raids. Raids, the function of raids is if they're attacking a unit, like a headquarters, a supply depot, mobile supply unit, attack helicopter, airfield, whatever. The purpose of that would be to put a strike counter, strike level 1 or strike level 2 counter on there to degrade that particular unit's strength and capabilities and to disrupt it. Units bearing a strike marker have their ratings degraded somewhat. And if they already bear strike markers, they can actually also be flipped over to their reduced strength side. You can send raids against, again, detected HQs, supply depots, mobile supply units, attack helicopters. You can send them after airfields in order to try to kill aircraft or knock the airfield out of commission. You can also send them against the enemy detection and SAM tracks. Now, in this scenario, the tracks that we're using is on the air-sea battle scenario sheet. So if you open that up, you'll see that the PRC right now has a AAA level of 2, a SAM and detection level of 7. The Republic of China has a detection level of 6 and a SAM rating of 4. Now, that's not where they started, They actually started higher than that, but prior to the beginning of the scenario, the PRC can use up to 10 of their cruise missiles to strike targets. And so I sent them after a number of things. I sent them after air bases, and so that's why there's some strike markers on the airbase damage track. And I also sent them after the Taiwan air defense track. So that's why those ratings are lower than what the scenario says. So again, you can send raids against this track here, and the idea is a successful raid could degrade detection or SAMs yet further than they already are. So for this case here, let's go ahead and take some of these. We got 6 tokens here to play with. Let's just say we'll send these guys after airbase. Send these 2 guys after air defense track, and I could send these guys after the port. Raids probably make the most sense in this particular scenario because you don't really have any ground units to play with. So I would allocate everything first, and then we'll resolve it. Another thing you can do with raids is you can target enemy theater weapons. I guess those would be like Scuds. I don't think that we really have anything in this game qualifying as a theater weapon. Fifthly, you could also, if you're using a scenario where you're using the main map, you can interdict. You place interdiction markers in a mountain, high mountain, urban, highland woods, flat woods, rough woods, hexes with woods or mountain. Those kinds of terrain, you can put an interdiction marker down there to interdict movement, which can be especially effective in the mountains where you're confined to road movement. So you can really slow down a nationality's mobility with these guys. So that's the deal with raids. And again, you can send them after units or installations, but units or installations can only be targeted once per turn for a raid. Tracks, on the other hand, not necessarily. So I can send them after these tracks, several of them. The third, or the next kind of mission, second kind of mission you can do with special operations teams is you can do reconnaissance, which, if successful, detects an undetected unit, supply unit, HQ, and aside from adjacency, really this is the only way you can detect a supreme headquarters is using reconnaissance. You can also use special operations teams for targeting missions. And the reason you'd want to do that is if you're successful with a targeting mission, and actually we might do that with a couple of these here, because if you're successful with a targeting mission, it'll put down a targeting marker, and it will make it easier for units that are launching strikes, like airstrikes, against that particular target. Furthermore, targeting missions are safer for the special operations teams because once you're done rolling out the special operations, then you have to roll for survival for each of these tokens. So the tokens could die. And with raids, the chances of dying are greater than with any other kind of mission. So why don't we actually say we're going to do that with the air bases here. We're going to do a targeting, and a raid, and we'll leave the ports alone for now. So we'll do two raids on the air defense track, 2 targetings on the air bases, and then 2 raids on air bases. So how you resolve this, it's real simple. There is a chart for raids. If I can find it here. Special Operations Forces CRT. It's on the front of the advanced game tables. There's 2 major sections. One is for raid and one is for recon. And then there's 2 real small sections. There's a small little section for targeting on the far right. We'll do the targeting missions first on the air bases. So on air base number, it's upside down, number 4, top one. What we'll do for him is we're going to roll die. There's no die roll modifier, and we're looking for a 4 or less on a D10. And we roll 4, which means we get a target. If this was a U.S. or British Commonwealth mission, we'd put a -2 marker down. Any other nationality puts a -1 marker down. So let's go ahead and find a target 1. Put that on him. And then we'll roll for survival. You got to roll less than, you got to roll a 6 or less in order to survive. Otherwise, the game piece is eliminated. For U.S. or British Commonwealth, there's a -3 modifier to that. Non-U.S., non-Commonwealth allied unit is a -1. So this would be a, for the PRC, they're going to get a -1 for this. Now, if you're doing a raid, it's a +1. If you're doing interdiction, it's a +1. During turn 1 of tactical surprise, there's a -2. So we really don't even need to roll for this guy because there's really no way that he's going to fail. So we'll go ahead and throw him back onto the general display, but he goes into the used box. He feels so used. Okay, let's go ahead and roll for the guy number 5 for targeting. And again, looking for a 4 or less. He rolls a 0, so that's just ducky. We'll go ahead and put that down. And he goes back into the used box as well. So we're finished with our targeting mission. So you see, this happens real quick. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our raids. So for the raids, what we're going to do here is look at the raid section of the CRT, which is it's kind of intimidating and complicated when you first look at it. So let's break it down here. What are we doing? First, usually what you'll do is you'll look at the terrain that you're going to be attacking in, but we're not attacking in any terrain. So instead of looking at that, what we're going to look at is that white column that divides raid from recon. And it says detection, SAMs, theater weapons. That's the column that we're going to be rolling on. So we need to roll a 3 or less in order to put a mark or something down on this. There's a number of raid die roll modifiers. Most of these are not going to apply. +2 if occupied by 1 brigade. We're attacking tracks, so that's not going to apply. +1 if versus SAM or theater weapon. So for the SAM tracks, that might be more problematic. So we're going to send our guys after the radars instead. So there really is no modifier to this. So we're going to roll for the guy on number 4. And the targeting isn't helping him. He's just going on a raid. That doesn't apply here. All right, he rolls a 6, so nothing happens. He doesn't succeed in accomplishing anything worthy of a strike marker. So now we have to roll for survival. But now with survival roll, since he did a raid, and because he's non-U.S. Commonwealth allied, he gets a -1. So those two offset. And then there's a -2 for tactical surprise, but a 9 would still kill him. So we got to do that. He rolls a 4 and he's safe and makes it home used. The guy on the 5, he rolls a die. He rolls a 4 and just misses. Just misses. So we're going to go ahead and roll for his survival. He rolls a 7 and he is safe as well. Lastly, the guys that are attacking the air defense track, they're attacking the radar there. So let's go ahead and roll for one of them. 6 does nothing. Survival. 9, he dies. Blum, blum, blum. Okay, next one rolls a 9 and fails. Survival roll is a... almost want to have that the other way around. That would have succeeded in knocking the detection down by 1, but alas. Oh well. I'm not sure I did the airbase damage right, because under normal circumstances you would be applying the terrain of where that thing is. And so, but in this scenario there is no terrain, so I just kind of treated it like, I don't know. Might not have done that right, but... You get the idea. Special operations, it's real simple. You put your markers down. You roll on a table. Some live, some die. They make it home. They don't, whatever. And their impact in the game is, it can be huge, but usually it's not. It's just kind of an interesting little thing that's happening along the sidelines. All right, so special operations done, and now we get to the heart of what we want to get to tonight, which is the air and naval rules. So here we go. Let's go ahead and look at some air units. If you open up the air superiority window, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out a Marine F-35. Let's do that. All right, I dragged it on the main map just so it's easier to see for everybody. And let's go ahead and look at the values on this air unit. First of all, units in this game that have a star in the upper right-hand side of the counter in some way, that's an indication that in some way there's an optional rule that's applying to that game piece. And for most game pieces with a star, they're not used unless that optional rule is in play. That's not always true because there is an entire division of PRC Marines that have a star, and the star only indicates that there is a rule where that division is used somewhat differently. But both divisions are always used in the scenarios. Okay, so up in the upper left-hand corner of the unit, the air unit, you have the letter A, and then you have the letter S. The letter A, if that appears in the upper left-hand corner, indicates that that is an all-weather aircraft unit. So weather is not going to impede its capabilities. They can fly unimpeded in clear and overcast weather, and they can even fly during storm weather at impeded capability. So whereas normally in a storm you don't get any air units in the standard game, you don't get any air points. Well, all weather aircraft actually can fly during storm, but their ratings are reduced. During overcast, all weather guys are unaffected. The letter S, if that appears in the upper left-hand corner, that indicates that they have stealth capability, and that's going to apply to any detection roll made against that unit. The aircraft type appears on the left-hand side vertically. You see this is an F-35B. Looking at the upper right-hand corner, you have the letter L. You'll have one of four different things. You'll either have an S, an M, an L, or a U. And that indicates the range of the unit, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. For now, just consider that to be short, medium, long, or unlimited range units. The number beneath that, there's always a modifier beneath that. It's either going to be a 0, a +1, or a -1, a +2, or a -2, and that is the pilot skill. -2s are the best, +2s are the worst. On the bottom of the counter, you have 3 numeric values, and you may have 1 or more asterisks on those values. So looking at the left-hand bottom value, that's the air-to-air combat rating, and each star there indicates something for its range, its standoff capability. If you have 1 star there, that means that they have standoff capability for both strike, or excuse me, for dogfighting. And we'll look at that in just a moment. But star means they can shoot at distance. 2 stars means they have 2 long-distance shots before they actually get into dogfight status. The middle number indicates its combat support rating. That's going to be used as a die roll modifier, either positive if you are defending, supporting a defense, or negative if you're supporting an attack, and it works just like air points do in the standard game. Combat support on a unit is basically how air points were used in the standard game. The number on the right indicates its strike capability, and that is for attacking, again, units or installations with the purpose of putting down strike level 1, level 2 markers, or destroying for installations. You put down a destroyed marker with that. A star means it has standoff capability, which improves its survival against SAM defenses, AAA, that sort of thing. So those are the air units in the game. And those are not used at all in the standard game, so this is all going to be new. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the Airspirity window open on my screen, and let me adjust it so I can see the chat bar if you have any questions. And I'll zoom in just a little bit. First of all, let me just direct your attention around this air superiority missions screen. You'll see in the middle of the screen there is a big box, and it says Air Superiority Missions, and there's a white dashed line running through the middle of it with red tones on one side and blue tones on the other. That's the box where air combat is going to be taking place. If you look on the on either side of this fold-out display, there's a number of boxes. Basically, there's one big box for every geographic area. All units are based on this air display card. You never take the air units and put them on air bases. It's all abstractly represented by this fold-out card. So all of the units that are considered to be dispersed throughout the air bases on Taiwan, for example, are represented by the counters that appear in the Republic of China box. Now, each of those geographic regions on the air display card are divided up into 3 sections. You have a ready box, which means those guys are ready for missions. And then you have a flown box, which means they are unready for missions. They are not able to fly. And then you have aborted, which is an even lower status. And in order to go from aborted to ready, you have to make a die roll at the end of the turn. And usually there's a range of die rolls that you have to make. For example, to go from aborted to ready, you have to roll a 0 or a 1. If you roll anything else, you end up going from aborted to flown. And so it's going to be another turn before that unit's going to be ready to fly. So you have geographic regions. So you got a box for the Republic of China, that's Taiwan. You have a box for Japan. So inside there you'll see that there's only one US F-16 unit that's actually ready right now. All the rest are kind of caught a little bit off guard because the PRC got tactical surprise here. You'll see that there's some Japanese aircraft available. Something I neglected to mention earlier is that when you first start one of the advanced game scenarios, there's actually this thing. If you click the button, it looks like a little yellow metal on the left side of the toolbar. Wait, that's eliminate pieces. No, it's the button with the red. Looks like a police siren, police light. It's right to the right of the button with the eye in it, right in front of air superiority. You'll find that this is the posture matrix. So before the game, what you're going to do is you're going to use a table on the advanced game tables. You'll roll for Japan and for the United States to find out the status. How does the administration feel about war? How does the military feel about their involvement in war? And the population, how does the popular people feel about war? And you sum those up and you look at this table on the advanced game tables to find out, based on the scenario conditions, what that country is going to do and how much of their forces they're willing to commit to the struggle. So before this scenario, the rules stipulated for this air-naval scenario that the U.S. is aggressive, and so all of their units are going to be in play, but to go out and roll out for Japan. So the result for Japan was a level 2 moderate involvement, which means they're going to be using all of their aircraft and detection capabilities are in play, but they are committing no ground units to the struggle. So nevertheless, the Japanese F-16s, F-15s, the F-2As, and the F-4 EJs are unready at the beginning of the scenario. All the PRC boys are ready to go. So yeah, they're all set, ready to rock and roll. Last thing we should talk about before we go a lot further here is weather's impact. I alluded to it earlier. You'll notice most of the PRC units are all weather. The J7s, the Q5, H10, and H6, JH7 aircraft, the J8s, they're older model aircraft. Excuse me, it looks like the JH7 is all weather and the J8 is all weather. but the older aircraft, the H-6 for example, do not have the A in the upper left-hand corner, which means that during a turn of overcast weather, their ratings would be halved, rounded down. So the Q5, for example, with ratings of 1 across the bottom, would basically be unable to fly during overcast. All its ratings would be 0. During storms, non-all-weather aircraft are not able to fly. All-weather aircraft may fly, but their air ratings are halved, rounded down. So the very capable J-11, for example, with the air rating of 5 would be considered air rating of 2 during a storm. Ranges. Now, because everything is really abstracted in the game, I need to talk about range. It's easier to visualize range, I think, on the Korea game because everything's on one map. With this game, you also have this naval map, so there's a little bit more to consider when it comes to range. Aircraft are rated according to range in the upper right-hand corner of their counter. They'll have an S for short, M for medium, L for long, or U for unlimited. What this means is that short-range aircraft may fly only in the same area. And how you visualize that is if they're based in the Republic of China on Taiwan, for example, then they can only fly missions on Taiwan. They can't impact anything in Japan or the Philippines, anything like that. Now, the exception to this is that short-range aircraft may fly between the PRC holding box and the Taiwan Straits inshore box. They may also fly between the PRC box and Penghu, which is an island. If you look at the naval display, you'll see it's an island in the Taiwan Straits. They may also fly between the PRC holding box and any hex on the main map. So that's what short range is. So all those short range older aircraft that are in the ready box here for the PRC, like the Q5 or the J7, they may fly missions anywhere in the immediate theater of Taiwan, but they could not impact anything in Japan, for example, or they couldn't fly any missions into South China Sea, Paracels, Ryukyu Islands, that sort of thing. Medium-range aircraft may fly missions one area distant from where they are based. So PRC units could, from there, impact South China Sea. Long-range aircraft may fly missions 2 areas distant. So you could go from the PRC to the Philippines, PRC to Japan. Unlimited range, well, just like it says, they may fly missions anywhere on the map, no matter where they're based. And those, I think, are just the B2s, the B1s, and I don't remember if there's B52s in this. Yeah, there are. Yeah, B52s, B1s, and B2s. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and do some air combat. Air superiority combat. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. What happens now in the sequence of play, once you've done all your special, the first player's done his special operations forces, the first thing that you do is you go into the air naval phase, and the first part of the air naval phase is air superiority. So what we're going to do first is we're going to count up the number of air bases or airfields that have strike markers remaining on them. So that means stuff that was left over that didn't recover from the previous turn or that were impacted by special operations forces this turn. So if we look at the air-sea battle scenario sheet, you'll see that there are strike markers on 3 of the Taiwanese air bases. So what we'll do is the owning player must move half of that number. We have 3 air bases, so half of that number rounded down. So 1 aircraft will have to go from a ready box to unready. So because there's 3 air bases damaged, we have that number, round it down, and that tells us we come over here to the air superiority window, and we'll take one of these Taiwanese guys out of play, and we'll just go ahead and take the Mirage out, I guess. Well, Mirage actually has better air-to-air ratings than this guy. Let's go ahead and take this guy out. All right. And then if there was any air base captured, destroyed this turn, this is the point at which you would reset that marker. That's not going to apply now. So we'll move on to the next step, which is Airspirity Combat Resolution. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to look at the AWACS advantage. And if you look at the Advanced Air Sea Battle Scenario sheet, you'll see the AWACS advantage is in the 1 box, and it's red, which means the PRC has an AWACS advantage of 1. This marker will move up and down the track. And what it means is whoever has the advantage gets to choose his matchups of air-to-air combat engagements before his opponent gets to choose. So if this marker was in 2, the PRC could line up 2 guys, take 2 of his planes, and match them up with 2 enemy planes and say they're going to dogfight. And then the other guy would take 1 of his planes and match it up with an unengaged PRC plane. And then the PRC would get to do 2 more engagements, and it would just go back and forth like that. But the marker's into 1 box, so it's just going to go back and forth. And what will happen here now, before we actually make the engagements, is both players are going to decide how many of their air units that have an air-to-air rating of at least 1 that they're going to throw into the air superiority window. And since air superiority is a big deal on opening turn here, we want to get off to a good start with the PRC. We would throw just about everything with the kitchen sink in there, I think. Now, the only thing I might not want to throw in there, I kind of hesitate to throw in the Su-30s because even though they have really good air-to-air ratings, I also really like their strike and combat support ratings. So I might withhold maybe them and these guys, so I have some good strike capability. The rest of these guys here, the numbers for strike and combat support are minimal. So let's just throw these guys in. And there's different schools of thought on this, the wisdom of this. But this is how I would probably do it, because the Allies really don't have a lot of aircraft right now that are ready. And of course, as the Allies, they're going to probably want to throw everybody, as many in as possible, into this struggle. So now that everybody that's on here is contesting for air superiority is on this display. Now at this point, you look at the AWACS advantage and determine who's going to do the what matchups. And so the PRC is going to take the J-11 here against the Americans. And then Taiwanese would maybe take this guy against... Oh, maybe this guy because the pilot rating's a little lower. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this particular mechanic. Then these two might line up. And in Vassal, it might actually be helpful to stack the engagements. So let's just do that, and then we'll put them on the line. That way we're conserving space here. All right, then the PRC might take this guy here against him. And then this guy, let's go and gang up on the loser over here. And then take this really nice J-10. He's got a good pilot. We'll send him on him. Okay, now once we've got everybody lined up here, what we're going to do is the player that still has unengaged aircraft he's going to go ahead and take his plane. He can either just leave him in here unengaged, or he can use him to double up on somebody. So, and Mitchell's got some thoughts on this. The 2 schools of thoughts is matchup best versus best or best versus worst. Mitch says, from my perspective, unless stealth units are involved, it's a toss-up. So that was very decisive there, Mitch. We'll go ahead and take... We'll go ahead and take our extras here and throw him in there, throw him in there.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to. You were on a roll, so I didn't want to really interject. But
no, yeah, this is one of those things. What are your thoughts, just real quick, on the? Do you throw in your strike capable, combat support capable guys here on turn 1 just to try to wipe everybody out? Or do you just assume that you're going to maintain superiority threshold and use those for strike?
Yeah, the PRC is in the beginning. It kind of has an advantage, right? It doesn't have to throw its strike aircraft up there, and it can hold some of those back. So yeah, it's usually a valid tactic to hold some back because you're going to end up. So if you end up not doubling up, right? If you hold those J7s, those J8s out, you're going to end up with some level of air superiority anyway, just because you'll outnumber the other guy.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm thinking here. So we got all our matchups. I'm not going to go ahead and throw these other guys in. Their presence in here is going to do enough for us. So now we actually have to do the actual shooting at each other. So how this works is, first of all, there's 3 rounds of battle that happens here. First, long-range combat, and that's units that have 2 stars next to their air-to-air rating on the bottom right. And I don't think we have any of those. I think those are only going to be like your F-15s, F-15Cs. I think those are the only ones that are going to have that. F-35s, maybe F-22s. So nobody in the combat display has that. So that round gets skipped entirely. Should we do it, though, it would be simultaneous. If you had 2 guys with double stars shooting each other, it would be simultaneous. Right now, I don't think any of the games have units on both sides with double stars in that status. We're not there.
Yeah, the PRC stealth guys are long range.
Oh, that's right. The optional dudes. You're right. Yeah, they're up
right
here, J20 and J31. So we're not going to play with those though. Okay, so we go to then the standoff combat, and that's units with 1 star or 2 star. So your 2 star boys will get to shoot again, and again it's simultaneous unless advantage was gained in an earlier round. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with, say, these guys down here. So this is going to be simultaneous, and the F-16 will go ahead and shoot at the J-10, and then the J-10 and J-11 are going to shoot at the F-16. It's considered simultaneous, and how it works is there is a table for this, right? In the middle, the advanced air combat. It's on the right-hand side of your advanced sheet, the fold-out. And what you do is you subtract the attacker's. You take the attacker's rating and you subtract the target from that. So, for example, the J-11, we'll go ahead and roll him out first. He's got a rating of 5. We subtract the F-16's air-to-air rating of 4, and the net difference is a +1, so we're going to fire on the +1 column. Then we're going to apply a modifier equal to the pilot's skill, which is 0 in this case. If it was an attack versus a bomber, it'd be a -1. Oh, you're right. Skill doesn't apply until dogfight. You're right. You know how many times I've messed that up in games? Sorry, those are dogfight DRMs. Standoff DRMs are non-US, non-Japanese, non-Russian, non-PRC, have a +1 standoff attack. There's a -1 for attack versus a bomber. +2 of strike, attack, or firing. That would only happen later on during the strike rounds, actually. That wouldn't happen during this air superiority phase. F-15, US F-15 with F-22 support, there's a -1 for that. If you're doing this during a storm, there's a +3. So right now, the only there is no modifier. It's just going to be a straight up roll on the table. So I roll a 4, I look at the +1 column, and 4 is a capital A, which means the target is aborted, and so it's going to go into the aborted box of its geographic region. All right, but it's simultaneous, and the J-10 still has to fire. He's going to be on the 0 column because he's got air-to-air of 4, and so does the F-16. And he rolls a 5, which is AD/D. What that means is you can treat it either as D, the target is damaged but continues its mission after suffering a step loss, or A, and it's the moving player's choice. Well, he's already aborted, so he'll just, I guess, eat the abort result.
In standoff combat, only the left of the slash applies.
That's right. I'm really glad you're here, man, because, again, there's so many things in the game that it's easy to miss that. Yeah, only the left, so he doesn't have the option to even press on, so he's just going to abort. All right, he's firing back on the 0 column, and it's, again, without modifier, and he rolls a little bit better. He rolls a 3, which is going to abort the J10. So we'll go ahead and stick the J10 in the aborted, and the F-16 aborts. And this guy remains in the Airspirity Window. We go to the next, and the J11 will fire on the +1 column. He rolls a 7, which is just barely a miss. And the F-16 fires back at a -1 and rolls a 1. Nice shooting. And aborts the J11 and remains in the box. All right, next one up. Next one up is going to be we'll fire the J11 first. The F-16 will fire at the Su-27. All right, we'll throw on the +1 column. He rolls a 2, which is both damage and aborted. So we'll go ahead and flip him over. Let's see, status, reduce. But he'll fire back on the 0 column right after the Su-27 fires on the 0 column. Su-27's roll on there is, I think, it's just an abort. And the fire back on the 0 column, a 1, damages and aborts the Su-27. It's pretty violent. And again, you would track victory points once if you kill an aircraft. There's victory points for that, so you would track that on the victory point display. I'm not going to worry about it for the demo here. Okay, so next up, Su-27s, J11s against the F-16 here. And the J11 will fire on the +1 column. 6 will abort him. And the Su-27 rolls a 5. That's not going to do anything more than that. The F-16 fires back on the 0. Oh, nice shooting. Another damaged and aborted Su-27s. Somebody played Falcon 3.0. Okay. He gets aborted. All right, J10 gets doubled up. J10's going to fire, on the that in-house fighter of the PRC. All right, so he's going to fire on the 1 column. The Taiwanese guy is going to fire on the. He's going to shoot the worse. Try to get a kill there. All right, on the +1 column, a 1 is a damage and abort. Taiwanese fighter is attacked by the Q5 on the -2 column, and that doesn't do anything more. Its fire back on the +2 column is a 2, which damage and aborts the Q5, which I don't remember if it has a reduced side or not. It doesn't, so he's dead, and there would be a victory point for that. And this guy gets reduced and aborted. Pretty violent so far. And I probably shouldn't have unpaired these because there's still a dogfight round coming up. So my bad there. The J10 against the Mirage on the 1 column is a 0, which kills him outright. And the Mirage fires back on the +1 column. And it's a 0, which damages and aborts the J10. Ouch. Okay. And then this guy is eliminated. Which, again, there would be a victory point adjustment for that. Now you go to the dogfight round. And what happens in the dogfight round is it's not sequential. How the dogfight round works is it is resolved sequentially with the highest rating units firing first, unless advantage was gained in an earlier step. Mitch, refresh my memory on what is advantaged status.
So in the standoff round you had rolled and a result was advantage, in a physical game you just rotate the counter to show that you're advantaged over that plane.
Okay.
So what happens is no matter what your air-to-air ratings are, if you're advantaged over the other unit, you fire before that unit does.
Yeah, you know what? I think I was reading the table wrong, and I was reading the AD as abort instead of advantaged. So I believe that this guy here was that it's just going to be a straight up roll here, but it's going to be sequentially. The J11 fires first. There isn't going to be any modifier because he has pilot skill of 0, and none of the other modifiers apply. So it's again going to be a straight up roll, same table, and he rolls a 4, which aborts the F-16 before he can shoot. So there we are. Now, once all of the shooting is done, and this is where the game can really slow down a bit, is because you're working through all of this every single turn. So this is why they tell you straight up that the advanced game air rules do slow the game down somewhat. Once this is done, then what you do is you're going to look at the air superiority track, and it's on that card that we're using for the scenario, but the one on the map tells us more information, so we're going to look at that. And what we consider here, hang on, I need to hide the markers so that I can see what the underlying text. There we go. Okay, what we do here is we look at the ratio between the number of PRC units versus the number of Allied units that are left on the air superiority missions box. And right now it's all PRC, so I believe PRC gets supremacy for that, correct?
Yeah, if there's no enemy left, it's a nominal 1.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, clearly there is more than 5-to-1 ratio here, because that was about as bloody of an air-to-air round as I've ever seen here. Lots of low rolls. So this is going to supremacy, and it will remain on the PRC side. So it means detection would apply everywhere. The second thing that happens is whenever a level of air superiority is gained on this, no matter how, I mean, if you're on supremacy and you maintain superiority in this round, each time that you maintain or gain some level of superiority, whether it be superiority or supremacy, then what you do is you take the AWACS advantage marker and you move it 1 box in your favor. So the PRC will have advantage level 2 for next turn. Also then at the end of the turn, all these guys that are in the aborted box, they're going to have to dice to see if they'll become ready. And for the Allies, they got a 20% chance of going from aborted to ready, whereas the PRCs, their ability to go from aborted to ready is only 10% chance. So, all right, so that is air-to-air missions, air superiority. Anyone have any questions on that so far? Now, all these guys that are in the air superiority box, they're done. I mean, once you've tabulated who got air superiority, what the level of that is, move the AWACS marker, you can go ahead and put them into the flown box. They're done for the turn. That's why if you want anybody to do any strike missions, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're going to have to withhold them for that. So that's why I withheld some of these very capable multi-role fighters here for the PRC, because they have very good either combat support or strike capability. All right.
Did you use them to intercept with, though?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah, you're right. They should stay in here to be used for interception rolls. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Getting the wagon before the horse again. Okay, so once we've done the once we have done the air-to-air combat, you've resolved all that stuff. You got the Airspirity level set. You got the detection ranges established. Updated AWACS. Um, At this point, you would start rolling the dice for control of inshore boxes. I don't have time to get into that tonight. I want to show you a few more things about the air rules. But there's some rules in here. If you look at the advanced sequence of play, it'll direct you to go to certain rule sections to determine the status of inshore boxes and to roll out for sea control. Bear in mind that in the Taiwan game, there's much more to this, so you'll want to look that up in the game specific rules, because it's much more fluid in this game. The control of sea areas will go back and forth. Okay, once all of the air naval phase is done and you've rolled for mine clearance, you've rolled for detection for naval units that are not in port, you've done all that stuff, then there's a second Special Operations Forces phase. That's when the Taiwan, US, Japanese, whatever, that's when their Special Operations Forces would begin to do their missions. And once that's done, then we go to the first strike phase. And during the strike phase, both players conduct strike combat by allocating either cruise missile points or putting their air units down for airstrikes. So I'm going to show you just a couple of these just to show you the flavor of it. And we'll assign a couple of our very capable H-10 bombers to hit some air bases. So let's try to hit these air bases here that were targeted. So we'll throw a couple down for that. Don't want to go too crazy with this, because in an ordinary game, it's easy to start slapping down strikes everywhere. But bear in mind that some of those guys, you're going to need some combat support for some critical combat situations, and the turns are long. There's a lot, and when you're playing with the full map and everything, remember there's a lot that can happen in a turn. You'll burn through those air points really quick in the standard game. Same thing is true here. It's very easy to run out of air units, and then all of a sudden you're in a pickle and you really need them. So we'll go ahead and throw down maybe a couple more strikes on the detection track here. So here we go. We'll just do 4 strikes. We'll allocate that for now. I may not have mentioned it before though, but detection is also important for naval units. Naval units have their own air defense tracks, and how that is determined is if you look at the naval window, there's actually a little table there that'll tell you what the detection, SAM, AAA ratings are for naval counters in the game. So PRC. The PRC SAG has a detection rating of 6, SAM of 6, AAA of 2. U.S. Carrier Battle Group is the best. They have detection rating 8, SAM 8, AAA 3. Have fun attacking that. All right, so let's go ahead and take the H-10 attacks that were targeted. We'll start with the guy on airbase number 4. And how this works, first of all, is in an ordinary standard game, you roll there's an air defense fire. You just roll 1 die on a table. With the advanced game, what you do is you roll to see if there's detection first. So to roll for detection, you look at the advanced detection table, and you look at the column that corresponds with where the detection marker is on the air defense track if you're doing something in that country. All right, so because we're attacking an air base, it's going to be in Taiwan. The Taiwanese radar set is going to be impacting that. Now, having thought better of the situation, it'd probably make more sense to roll out the attack. Mitch, also, I can't remember, is this sequential? I mean, would it make more sense to attack the radar first so that they're knocked down a few more pegs before we go after the air bases? I don't remember.
So that's only possible if you have Wild Weasel aircraft, and the PRC does not. So the Allies can hit the PRC detection track before the rest of the strikes go in, but the reverse is not true.
That's right. I know I've asked that question before of you on Facebook, and I remember it now. Okay. So it really doesn't matter here. Let's go ahead and go with the H-10 attack as previously announced. So the PRC right now, they have a detection rating of 6. So we look at the column of 6. We look at the raid die roll modifiers for this. Mission versus mission composed solely of stealth units does not apply. Wild Weasel involved in the mission does not apply. Versus transport paradrop combat support mission does not apply. Weather does not apply. Proximity to HQ does not apply in this case. It's a track. We'll just work through that. AWACS advantage is on 2, but it's on the other side. So if the Taiwanese had AWACS advantage 2, then there would be a -1. If AWACS is 3, there's a -2, and so forth. So really, there is no modifier. We're just going to roll on the 6th column, and if it's detected, then there will be SAM and AAA fire. Otherwise, the strike happens first, and then the SAM and AAA fire takes place after the fact. All right, die roll is a 3, which is a D for detection, so he is detected. We'll just go ahead and, in an ordinary game, I would not do this, but we could mark him as having detection. All right, so he's detected. Now the next thing we go is we look at the SAMs. Advanced Air Defense Fire. Advanced Air Defense Fire, you're going to look at the column that corresponds with where the SAM marker is on the track. It's in the 4 box. So we look at SAM. We're going to use the SAM 3 to 4 column box. Again, die roll modifiers for SAM fire, none of them are going to apply here. Stealth and Wild Weasel do best against these. So there's no modifier, so he goes ahead and throws down a 0. Well, it's about as bad as it doesn't get any worse than that. Okay, that's an A for abort. So he is aborting, which means I don't believe he has to undergo AAA fire then after he aborts, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's a distance thing, right? The SAMs are engaging outside the AAA envelopes.
Yep. So he's gone. All right. Next guy. Man, a lot of low die rolls tonight. Detection is a 5, which is still detection. I think only a 7, 8, or 9 is no detection. So so he is detected. SAM roll is a 1, which is just as bad. Okay, let's roll again because I'd like to actually show you an airstrike. All right, let's say we rolled a 4. All right, 4 is a +1 result. Now what that means is, and you can use strike markers for this. I'll put a strike marker on top of them. What that means is he's going to get a +1 modifier to his attack, but that'll be offset by the -1 targeting marker on the target. Now we go to AAA fire, and the AAA is at level 2, and AAA can only go as high as level 3 on these tracks. So AAA level 2 throws down, man, lots of low die rolls, a 2. All right, let's just imagine he rolled a 9, okay? Just like that. All right, so AAA didn't do anything. Now you go to the strike table. And in the strike table, you look at the strike value on the air unit. So the strike unit for this H-10 is a 4 with an asterisk, which means it has standoff capability. I trying to remember what standoff capability does for you. I believe it would allow you to strike before AAA fires, if you so choose. But there is a modifier to using that. So I just went with the assumption we didn't use that. Okay. Die roll let's look at the strike value. Strike value is 4, and you look at the terrain in which this occurs. And also you want to consider if it's a hardened target or not. Let's just say that this airbase is in the flat lands. So we would use the 4 column on this thing. Let's just imagine that for a second. So we're using the 4 column of marsh flat. So you cross-index those. That's going to be what you're going to roll on. And we would apply pilot skill, which is 0 here. The SAM AAA result. There was a +1 from the SAM result. We're just pretending like AAA missed. If it's a cruise missile strike, there's a modifier. There's all kinds of modifiers on here, but the only ones that I see that apply is the ones from the strike. If you're talking a hardened airbase, remember hardened air bases are the ones with the blue airplane and the black circle, then you would use a completely different cross-indexing system. In fact, you would have to have a strike value of at least 4 to even try to attack it. And you also use the strike values individually. You can't add 2 counters together. They attack individually. So this H10, even if it was with another H10, they couldn't add their values together and get an 8. All right. So this guy here's got a rating of 4. We throw in that 4 column, and it's just a straight up roll because the target and the SAM outcome offset one another. And roll a 9, which is a miss. Okay. Let's just pretend like we rolled like the Taiwanese SAMs. Let's say we rolled a 4. Okay. What would that do? The result on that table then would be a 1, which means you would put a strike 1 on that airbase counter. And so that's going to impact perhaps the number of aircraft that will be available to the Taiwanese on the next turn's air superiority phase. You'll also roll for collateral damage. And there is a table on the back of the advanced combat fold-out. It's called Collateral Damage. And if it's a strike versus an airbase and you got a 1 result, then you look at strike versus airbase, look at the 1 column, you throw another die, and there's no modifiers. So let's say we roll, again, a 9. That would do nothing against the any air units. Then we roll for, I believe you roll once for everything, right? Or do you roll once for the air and then once for air points and then once for helicopters? I don't remember.
No, it's just 1 roll based on the level of damage you applied.
Okay, and if there's attack helicopter there, that would apply.
Then you'd make a second roll.
Okay. Yeah, I seem to remember making a second roll. So attack helo, you roll again a 9. PRC can't shoot this time. So that's how that would work. And then this guy would go to the flown box and he would be done. And we would mark a... I wish these markers were clonable. Then we mark like a strike marker on that. The targeting marker stays on there until the end of the turn. So you could hit it again during the second strike phase if you wanted to. All right, if we were hitting the... let's say the guys are hitting the radar. Okay, we got two airstrikes rolling in on that, but let's say they're rolling in together. Okay, because you can put 2 strike aircraft together along with up to 2 escorts and a wild weasel. So let's go ahead and take those guys in, and again we roll for detection, and this is just 1 strike package. Okay, so we only make 1 detection roll. It's a 0, so ED is early detection. That means the mission can be attacked by interceptors and SAMs. Unfortunately for the Taiwanese, they don't have any interceptors on the air superiority window, so that doesn't help them any further. But the SAMs do get to shoot. And so again, we throw on the 3-4 column. And I believe we throw per at each air unit. So for the top guy, he rolls a 4, which is a +1. So we'll go ahead and mark him with a strike 1. And then the other guy, they just miss him. Now he's got standoff capability. And here's where you might want to just go ahead and use a standoff capability. let's see here. There is a modifier for that then on the advanced strike table. And I'm looking for it and I'm not seeing it. I seem to remember something about standoff.
Yeah, that's versus a foot unit.
That's what it is. Okay, so it's not gonna hurt us here. That allows us then to avoid the flak. So, all right, so here we go. Now, how we attack a track is there is a whole, you know how on the advanced strike there is a row for each terrain type? Well, there's a row for the terrain type, if you will, of air defense tracks. So we look at that row and we look at the 4, his attack streak of 4, and basically you want to roll a 3 or less to knock this down at least 1. So for the guy with the strike, he's going to be a +1 and his pilot skill 0, so he's going to throw a +1 to his roll. And that becomes a 5 for no effect. The other guy has a -1 to his roll, and he rolls a 3, which is reduced to 2, and that will knock the radar down 1 peg. And we can go ahead and take that strike marker off this guy and throw them back into the flown box. And that is really the air rules to the game. There's more. There's mining missions that you can engage in, but this is the nuts and bolts of it. This is really the heart of the air game, because what I just walked you through here, you will do the same thing for strike packages going in for combat support. What you do with combat support is during a combat resolution phase, you're about to resolve combat in a particular hex, you can take guys out of the ready box that have at least a 1 in the middle number on the bottom, combat strength of 0. And we go ahead and throw those guys in there. You can take, if you're the attacker, you can throw 2 guys in. Defender can throw 1 guy in. And you can always have 2 escorts, including a wild weasel. So that is the that's the basics of the advanced game, if you will. Once again, you can attack naval units in the game, but when you attack naval units, you're going to use when you roll on the air defense tables, you're going to remember that you're not going to look at the placement of the radar counter on the track. You're actually going to look at that table on the naval window that tells you what the detection rating is for that particular fleet unit. And that's how you'll determine where you roll on. So naval units are a little bit tougher to attack, and they're also considered hardened targets. And their AAA can also interrupt your attack. The AAA can shoot down cruise missiles, that kind of thing. It's considered to be close-in weapon systems. So naval units are a little bit harder to get at. So I'll stick around for a few minutes here. Mitch, thank you very much for being here tonight. It's always great having a designer help us out with these things. And hopefully we did a fair job of prepping players to move from the standard game up into the advanced game. If you get the air rules down, everything else just kind of fits into place in the system. The naval rules are a little involved, but the heart of it really is the air rules that bring the game to a new level of complexity. And once you got that down, everything else just kind of meshes. Okay, well, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and stop the video at this time.